So, I'm a big Fallout fan, and I, of course, I go on places like Reddit or any sort of social media, and you probably know if you're a Fallout fan, like I don't know what you even call it really, the conflict that goes on, the disagreements, the whole, no one hates Fallout more than Fallout fans, all kinds of things, and people just disagree, they argue and debate each other constantly over like every tiny detail about Fallout, and it's just, I don't know, it's crazy. And I try not to get involved with things like that. Obviously, I have my opinions about the series, as does anyone, but I choose not to engage with other people about it. I've got some notes written down, and what I wanted to talk about in this video specifically was essentially Fallout as a franchise, how it's been handled by Bethesda, the showrunners for the TV show. A lot of people like it, a lot of people don't. Some people think that Bethesda in general has done a good job. A lot of people think they've done a terrible job and they've ruined the IP and someone should just take it off them or whatever. Or that Obsidian should come along, and because both companies are under the Microsoft umbrella, that we can get New Vegas 2 or whatever, even though personally I think that should not happen, and I'm not interested in a sequel to New Vegas as much as I do love New Vegas. So I'm going to be talking about a few key subjects I've got noted down. So a complaint I hear about quite a lot, and I used to be kind of a firm believer of this, was when you take a Bethesda Fallout game and you compare it to Fallout 1, Fallout 2, New Vegas, like there's a lot of differences, like on the surface, like there's not a lot that's different, but if you focus on quests or the dialogue, especially the dialogue, the choices, role-playing options, things like that, like they are quite different, and you'll probably find that Fallout 1 and 2 and New Vegas are quite a lot deeper, generally speaking, in terms of the role-playing aspect, I suppose. Now I think Bethesda can do quite well with those things, but I think it's more rare, or it's not as obvious as how important of an aspect that is, that role-playing element. And your choices matter. They have really, really serious consequences, like dire consequences if you choose to do something that's just terrible and just not a good thing at all. Or you choose, like in New Vegas, for example. Spoilers if you haven't played, obviously, but no matter what you choose, there's going to be upsides and there's going to be downsides to it. And it's like there's no real good or bad option necessarily, unless, of course, I mean, you got Caesar's Legion, but I don't know. You can argue that they have good things too, but the bad definitely outweighs the good with that faction specifically. Whereas Bethesda, I don't think they have as much of that freedom, if you want to call it that. Of choosing different factions that actually have like a real impact. Or the factions aren't as fleshed out compared to like Interplay Fallout, or especially New Vegas with Obsidian. So I think a lot of that is, people say things like, oh, Bethesda's just terrible at writing, and they're just the bane of my existence, and they're awful, and I don't particularly like them as a company. I don't really enjoy their style of games, I guess, kind of. I mean, Fallout 3 and 4, and to an extent 76, I can't find enjoyment in those games, but I think generally speaking, they're not my go-to in terms of like role playing. But there are things they do well, such as exploration. I think I said there's some things they do well. I mean, I'm sure there are other things, but the first thing I think of is exploration. Like Fallout 3, Capital Wasteland, I love exploring it, it's great. I enjoy it a lot. So I think a lot of this comes down to difference in design philosophy, if you want to call it that. Just how they make the games, or the DNA of each company's games. They're very different. They're always going to be different to each other. Like, you can't expect Bethesda to make a game on the level of Obsidian, like with Fallout New Vegas or Interplay. I just don't think they are ever going to make a game on the same level in terms of the role playing and the dialogue aspect, and choice making, and how important these things are, and how crucial they are to the game's plot. I just don't really think Bethesda's interested in that so much. I don't know, because I think a lot of people believe that Bethesda is not capable of making such a game that's rich in role-playing elements. I personally believe they are. I think they can do it if they want to. People give a lot of praise to the Far Harbor DLC in Fallout 4. And I haven't completed Far Harbor, so I don't have a full opinion on it, but what I have played and what I've seen, yes, I think they did pretty good with that in terms of making a really good Fallout experience. And it's also kind of different enough. Like, I think this is a problem that plagues Bethesda with Fallout, and maybe why they, in the eyes of some people, fail, is I think they focus too much on nostalgia, nostalgia baiting, or oh, look at these iconic things like creatures, or the Brotherhood or whatever. They were in the old Fallout games. Look at these guys. They constantly include these things because they're iconic, and because I don't know, they're going to help with sales or whatever, because people will be like, oh my god, look, it's the Brotherhood, or oh my god, Super Mutant, or Rat Scorpion, or whatever. And it's understandable, including those things, but I think, I just don't think you need to. I think you can have new, area, like native or relative creatures, mutants, whatever, factions, characters, things like that we haven't seen before, and I think Far Harbor did that quite well from what I can remember, and I think they are so capable of doing stuff like that and making a completely new experience while it's still clearly being Fallout, and being a good Fallout experience at that, instead of trying to kind of lure people in with like a familiar setting or creatures or factions, which I feel like in a way the TV show has done, like going back to New Vegas, Boneyard in season 1, the LA Boneyard, like things like that. Now obviously I'm not going to complain about seeing those things again, because obviously the West Coast Fallouts I love the West Coast as a setting, and I think it is the best in the Fallout series. But it's not something we need to see again, especially from Bethesda. I just don't think it's their strong suit. But with design philosophy, if you want to call it that, and just how a company like Bethesda compared to Interplay and Obsidian or Black Eye or whatever, how they write their games, how they make their games, like, they are different, and you can't expect Bethesda to make an Obsidian game or an Interplay game. You just can't do it. I think people need to expect, like, whenever Fallout 5 comes out, or whatever it's going to be, expect a Bethesda game. Expect a Bethesda game. Don't expect anything different. And at this rate, I'm honestly, after like Starfield, now I haven't played Starfield, so I'm not just like, oh, it's terrible, because I don't know. But from what I've seen, what I've heard, like, it was lacking in a lot of ways, and Sadly, I do believe Fallout 5 is going to be lacking in some areas, and part of me worries that Bethesda is a company that doesn't learn from criticism, or they don't take it, they don't listen to it. I don't know. It's hard. And obviously, they own Fallout. They can make any type of Fallout game they want to. They don't have to necessarily listen to us, and that's fine. Because it's their IP. If they want to do something that a lot of people, including myself, disagree with and think, oh no, that's not a good idea. At the end of the day, they can do it, can't they? They're not going to stop just because of some chronically online people are going to say, oh no, that's not my Fallout. That's not my Fallout. No, Todd, why are you doing this? Emil, why are you doing this? Whatever. They're not going to listen. So there's no point getting so caught up in all of that, because what will be will be. So, design philosophy, I've sort of loosely covered that. Obviously, I haven't scripted this at all. I've just noted things down because I can't be bothered to write a script. Although it would probably help. So what we got? So Bethesda vs Interplay and Obsidian Fallout, including the show. So yeah, I suppose this leads me on to the next point, which is themes in Fallout. Eternal ruin and apocalypse versus the post-apocalypse and what I call redevelopment, or societies and governments emerging and becoming fairly advanced in the post-war world. So obviously, when you play a Bethesda Fallout game, you notice one big thing, especially if you come off of New Vegas or Fallout 1, and especially Fallout 2. Now, each game world, like the Wasteland, they do vary in terms of how civilized and developed each area is, right? So with Fallout 2, when you play it, there are some places where there's people squatting and they're living in tents, whatever, or shacks. And then you have Fallout New Vegas, and it's the same story. But also, if you play Fallout 1 and 2, you see cities, or like big towns or whatever, where people are sort of bundled up in like pre-war buildings. But you do have a few places that have these, like adobe buildings, or Gex sort of settlements kind of things that we use with the Garden of Eden creation kit. So you have things like that that show those people wanted to obviously rebuild and create new things, new societies and towns, cities. Whereas in a Bethesda game you don't really see that, and of course there could be all kinds of explanations. Oh, the East Coast was hit harder by the bombs, or they didn't have many Gex over there, like issued to the vaults or whatever, so people couldn't rebuild settlements from scratch, or they couldn't have this lush sort of vegetation and wildlife and all these things. And I think that is valid, but I also think it's just a convenient way to say Bethesda likes to keep the world fucked in Fallout, and I think when it comes to the player character, Bethesda has a very specific way, or a formula of what they do. So it's kind of like the Elder Scrolls, I suppose. Now I'm not a huge fan of the Elder Scrolls, so anything I say, you're welcome to disagree or take with a grain of salt. But what I've noticed is it comes off as if they want the player to feel powerful, right? To build themselves up, to level up and feel powerful, like they're unstoppable, like they're a god. And I think that's translated over to Fallout quite a bit, where you're like this person who came from a vault, and you're on this mission, and you're going to level up, and you're going to kick some ass, and you're going to the wasteland's yours, as you get more powerful and stronger and better perks and different things like that. And I think often the world in a Bethesda Fallout game feels quite stagnant, because that leaves room for you, the player character, to how would I say, extend your will, onto the game world. Like whatever you want to happen, whatever choices you want to make for the factions in that game, for the settlers, whatever. That's yours to make, and no one's going to stop you. And they'll try, but you'll stop them because you're the player character. You might be able to talk them down or just kill them or whatever. Wasteland's yours. You're the big player character, and they want you to feel powerful. And that strokes the player's ego. And it's understandable why they would do something like that. You wanting the player to feel good. I'm not saying Bethesda games just hand everything on, to you on a silver platter or whatever. I'm not saying that. Like there's still an element of challenge there and progressing. But I think once you do, it's like you're this almost unstoppable god, and you're just ready to destroy everything or make the wasteland a better place. It's like with Fallout 4 with the settlement building. It's like everyone's just kind of stagnant, and it kind of, although there are settlements that do exist, and Diamond City, Good Neighbor, whatever, Covenant, it's like other than that, the world feels quite stagnant, like it's waiting for you to build these new settlements and rebuild Boston, the Commonwealth or whatever, and that was your doing, and you can feel proud of that kind of thing. Not at all realistic in my opinion. I feel like, over 200 years after a massive nuclear catastrophe, the world will be way more developed than it is in games like Fallout 4, or especially Fallout 3. And then, okay, so that's like a Bethesda Fallout game. That's like how I see it. Like people wait on you to make things happen because you're the player, you're the special character. No pun intended, special. Then you take Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. It's like Fallout 1, you're a vault dweller, you're naive, you don't know what the world's like, and you realise how brutal it is. Like you step out the vault and I don't know, you get killed by a fucking rad scorpion, and if you haven't saved your game, then the joke's on you. You've got to start all over again. You get killed by some bandits or raiders or whatever. And, on the first places you go to, again, spoilers, on the first places you go to, if you head east, is literally, it's a village, it's not massive, it's not a bustling city yet, but, it's built from scratch, you see these people and they've already started without you, and you come to find pretty quick that, the world is already moving on from the bombs. People aren't just waiting around being like, oh, let's hope someone just helps us, clear out these raiders and build us a settlement. Like, yes, you do have, well, not necessarily have to, but you do get the option to help some people with, like, clearing raiders or monsters or whatever, creatures, rad scorpions, things like that. But they've already started without you, with that rebuilding, because you as the player in those games, you're not a deity, you're not a god, you're not this all-powerful, your ego isn't being stroked like it's, the game is obviously brutal, and it's not being easy on you. You know what I mean? That's kind of like the impression I get with Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 as well. And Fallout 2 arguably more so, because it's like 80 odd years after Fallout 1 and the world's even more progressed and even more developed, and you're like, fucking hell, I live in this tribe and there's like bustling cities and stuff, and while those cities do have their problems and some really, really, really bad problems, they're still functioning. They're still, they have electricity, water, food sources and different things, and they've already started without you. And I think that's like a key difference compared to a Bethesda Fallout game, or a Bethesda game probably in general, is the focus or lack of focus on how important the player character is to basically anything that happens or will happen in the game world, if that makes sense. That's like the difference I see with the game like Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 1 and 2 as well, like I just said, compared to Fallout 3. Fallout 3, the world is so fucking stagnant, and you're like, it's been 200 years, and yes, I know DC's been blown to smithereens, it's the White House is gone, things like that. I'm aware of that, and there's so much radiation, there's no clean water until you come along and you fix the problem. And I think that's what Bethesda likes to do. They like to place that responsibility on you. The world is fucked up. So you, the player, you have the option, you have the chance to come and, bring a solution, make the world better. But if you don't want to make it better, you can make it worse. You can make it so much worse if you want to. You still have that choice, which I do like. It's comical, but it is good, and it is kind of very Fallout in my opinion. To have those options of just fucking everything up if you want to. It's totally cool. So that's a massive difference I see between a game like Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. The difference in how progressed each part of like the US is. Like DC compared to obviously Vegas or Nevada or California, whatever. Like region, west versus east sort of thing. So that's and that's also like what I see brought up in debate a lot with the Fallout community in terms of what people like. Obviously, some people like Bethesda's approach, because I think there's like this fear of if you make the Fallout world too developed, there's too many bustling cities and lights everywhere and stuff, kind of like Vegas. It's like, is it still a Fallout game? Does it lose its identity of this war-ravaged, brutal world that is unforgiving? And I think Bethesda likes that sort of feeling and theme and aesthetic in a Fallout game, and which is understandable because it's cool, and a lot of people like it. But I think it's just about balance, like Fallout New Vegas. And Fallout 2, you had these cities, you had these societies, but they weren't without faults, The NCR is not perfect. They are, they've done some awful things, Bitter Springs Massacre, bribes to like, what was it, Brahmin barons or something, all kinds of corruption and different things, and not even being able to keep like caravans and traders safe on some of their roads, and then people in like Legion territory say, it's pretty awful here, but at least the roads are safe, at least traders are safe and whatnot. So it's there are faults, there are issues, and you can play a part in changing kind of the landscape of that game world in Fallout New Vegas, for example. I feel like that at its core is what Fallout is about. Yes, war never changes, but I think that's kind of been misinterpreted a bit. Like it was in Fallout 2, I think it was the intro. It was like the end of the world occurred pretty much as we predicted. Not too many humans, not enough space or resources to go around, something like that. Ron Perlman. And yeah, like the resource wars, you could argue kind of they're like the catalyst. They kind of started everything else that followed until the Great War. Overpopulation and whatnot, and resources. You know, and obviously the NCR expanding east into Nevada and Mojave wasteland was, I'm pretty sure, largely to do with resources, because obviously they were, you know, growing larger, more, you know, higher population in their territories. They needed more resources, you know, and you can argue that's partially what War Never Changes kind of means. It's like expansion, resources, and also ideology, you know, as well. And I think instead of just being like all these factions, you know, they all want to save the world, but they disagree on how, you know, which is what Maximus said in the TV show. You know, that's true, but I think it can sometimes go maybe deeper than that. I don't know. It's but I think Fallout kind of has a pattern of just keeping it at, you know, these factions fight each other, then everything's destroyed, and then you got to build it all back up again, or then it gets destroyed again. It's difficult to figure it out, really. Like the War Never Changes like message, I guess, if you want to call it that. You know, like the nature of war, like the methods of war, you know, they change and advance and you know, over time, but the reasons, or like the nature of war and conflict doesn't change. You know, it's like it's human nature kind of thing, and it's about like expansion and resources and territory. I think is largely what it is. Maybe that's a large part of the message. So what else have we got? I think we've covered basically all the notes I've got. I've been all over the place, really, just kind of sharing my thoughts, you know. But we got Fallout going forward, so obviously we don't know when we're going to see a new Fallout game. With the TV show, we're probably not going to see a new game for. Those people are saying, oh, not till 2030. I hope sooner, but honestly, it's looking kind of realistic. Just, you know, not to see a Fallout game before 2030. It's 2026 now, so I guess we'll see. But I think people just they fight too much over what they think Fallout is, you know, and they think Bethesda should abide by this method, this formula of how to make a Fallout game. And obviously, I'm not defending how they make their games, because there's a lot of things about Bethesda Fallout that I do not like. But at the end of the day, it is their IP, like I said earlier, you know, and they can do what they want with it. It's, you know, as sad as that kind of is to say, you know, because obviously I think we all wish that we could make a Fallout game and, you know, decide what we want to do with it, kind of thing. And we wish we were in that position, but we're not. So, best thing we have is mods, I suppose. But yeah, Fallout going forward. I don't think Fallout will really change in terms of its key themes. Like, I think there's always going to be new strains of super mutants or FEV in a Fallout game. You know, it's going to be like rad scorpions, all the kind of tropes, if you want to call it that. You know, there's going to be the Brotherhoods, there's going to be all these things. I feel like maybe Bethesda sometimes doesn't want to take risks. With Fallout, they want to keep certain things safe, things they know kind of work, that a lot of people will not complain too much about. I don't know. It is hard, but I think maybe some of the key messages and themes of Fallout have been lost or mistranslated. Like if I was to make, you know, a Fallout 5, for example, I think I would go to a completely new location that we have not seen in a Fallout game. Wouldn't be on the East Coast, wouldn't be on the West. See, a high contender is somewhere like Texas, or maybe the Midwest, somewhere around there. I don't know. Possibly, I know I just said not the West Coast, but maybe the Northwest. See possibly some NCR outposts and territories. I'm not sure. That'd be quite cool. But ideally, I'd like to keep it like a blank slate, you know, like a clean slate. in this Fallout game, this hypothetical game, where all the factions, we have not seen them before. I think it'd be quite cool if maybe some of the factions or some characters in said game like ran into like the Brotherhood or the NCR, or they've heard of them, and they can be referenced. Because I think it is important to keep some past elements of Fallout into a new separate Fallout game that has more or less nothing to do with those previous things, right? But I think that there should still be a few little references, not too much, because it's like if it's in a completely different region, for example, it's like, well, how do all these people know who the Brotherhood are or who the NCR is, as an organization? Brotherhood is more plausible because at this rate they're all over the US in Fallout. They're all over the country, so I guess they could be everywhere. But I wouldn't include them in my Fallout game. I just wouldn't, because they are overused in my opinion. But yeah, there'd be completely new plot. It's not a rehash. It's not like a redo of some previous plot device, if you want to call it that. These new factions. Side with whichever one you want. I think like maybe structure it kind of similarly to how New Vegas did the factions. That would be quite cool. Like reputation and disguises, stuff like that. That would be really, really cool. I guess a lot of these things are some things that Fallout London, the mod, did really good. Again, I haven't played it fully, but I have played it. I've played bits of it, not for a while, but I can remember it being quite good. It was pretty cool. So there were some cool quests that I did. Really fun to explore as well. But I'm gonna stop here because I'm going off the rails. I don't think Bethesda Fallout games will change very much in terms of their formula, and I hope I'm wrong on that. I hope we get something fresh. I don't mind another East Coast Fallout game. Like there's loads of places to explore, but somewhere completely new would be refreshing. It would be nice, like a part of the post-war US that we have not seen before. That would be lovely, but I guess we'll see. But honestly, I used to be so worried about is Fallout in the right hands, and when you're just chronically online, looking at all these posts and you're kind of being influenced by other people saying like, oh, Bethesda's awful, they're ruining Fallout and everything like that. I don't think it's as serious as that. I love Fallout and it's like one of my favourite things ever, but it's a video game franchise, it's an IP, like, it's a game at the end of the day, and whatever happens to it happens. I'm not saying that as an excuse to just accept any kind of slop that these companies make. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I just think maybe we overreact about it sometimes. Obviously with some things you have a right to be pissed off about and be like, what the hell? But there's other things where I think it's kind of just, it's not that big of a deal. You're welcome to disagree, but I just think there are some things where it's like, whatever. So yeah, I just thought I would touch on this, make a long unscripted video about it. Hopefully you've stuck around and you've enjoyed what I've said, or maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, and that's totally fine. But I suppose we'll see where Fallout goes in the future. I'm enjoying the show right now. Obviously, there's things I disagree with, like choices that have been made. Things like like the NCR and like factions and stuff, and other groups. I'm not going to spoil that I wish didn't happen. But life goes on, and it's another day. So yeah, thank you for watching.